Initially, Mr. Kunle was upset and said that she ought to be grateful he was offering to marry her. He would often make comments saying he had married his fellow man, that she was just a piece of decoration. When Kunle called his twin useless, he made a fist and punched him in the face, and then introduced Sade to the lady as his useless, good-for-nothing wife. Once upon a time, in a small family of 4, Olu and Remy were lovebirds. They met each other in secondary school. Their love blossomed and they got married after they both turned 22. Olu was not from a rich family and neither was Remy. Their parents could not afford to send them to the university. After Olu graduated from secondary school, he found a job in a big company where he was hired as a gardener and a cleaner. To make ends meet, he had to do both jobs so that he could take care of his family. But when his parents saw how attached and in love he was with Remy, both families decided to allow them get married. After their wedding, Remy learned tailoring and opened up a small shop where she sewed clothes for people. Despite the fact that Olu and his wife Remy were not rich, they were very happy together. Barely 2 years after their wedding, Remy got pregnant and had a set of twin babies, a boy and a girl, Dele and Sade. Dele being older by 5 minutes. As the twins grew, they made their parents very happy. Olu and his wife Remy could not have any more kids, but they were very happy and felt very blessed and content with the 2 God had given them. Olu was also quite content at his place of work. His boss, the CEO of the company, was a very nice man, and Olu seemed to have found favor with him. From time to time, he would receive gifts, bonuses and tips from his boss for performing one task or the other, which was outside his job description. With all that put together, he was able to afford for his family and send his children to school. When Dele and Sade were in senior secondary school, something unfortunate happened to their father. Olu lost his boss and his son took over the company. When that happened, everything changed. His new boss, Mr. Kunle, was the only son. He was a young man of 26 who had just returned from the US, where he had been to obtain his master's and PhD degree. Mr. Kunle was nothing like his father. He was proud, arrogant, rude, and disrespectful. He treated his staff with so much disrespect and disdain and made the environment uncomfortable for everyone. He would not hesitate to insult, fire, or suspend the members of his staff for even the flimsiest reason. Olu found it increasingly hard to go to work every day and found his job very dissatisfying. He lost all his privileges and would complain of how his new boss would use him and not even appreciate when he does things out of his job description. He started to look for work elsewhere, hoping to find something better. His wife, Remy, continued to encourage and support her husband. After the twins finished secondary school, Olu and his wife Remy could not afford to send them to the university. They kept promising their children that things would get better and they would return to school to finish up their education. Olu secured a spot for his son Dele as a cleaner at the company. Dele was a very hardworking and diligent young man, just like his father, but he was also short-tempered. He would often frown and grumble anytime he witnessed his boss speaking rudely to his father, and this was almost on a daily basis because his father was in charge of cleaning the boss's office and restroom. His father, Olu, constantly had to calm and beg him not to react. Sade was the complete opposite of her brother. She was very calm, easygoing, and quite patient. She tried her best to stay away from trouble and anything that stressed her. After she graduated from secondary school, she joined her mother in dressmaking, and before long, she became good at it. Customers would bring in fabrics and request that it should be made by Sade. Olu's family continued to manage their lives, working hard to make ends meet, but in all things, through the odds, they remained thankful and happy. Unfortunately, Remy fell sick. She had complications with her heart and needed to have surgery. Olu tried his best to source for funds, but he could not put together the amount that was needed for the surgery. He went to see his boss, Mr. Kunle, and pleaded with him to pay him 6 months of his salary upfront to enable him pay for his wife's surgery. Mr. Kunle told him that his company does not run a charity organization, that he should source for funds through other means. Olu tried to plead with his boss, but he was met with insults and threats of sack. Meanwhile, Remy's condition was deteriorating. She was still managing herself, going to the shop, trying to raise money to add to whatever they had for her surgery. She was at the shop one day when she fainted. With the help of some neighbors, Sade rushed her mother to the hospital. In tears, she went to see her father at the office and bumped into Mr. Kunle, her father's boss. But she had no idea that he was the evil boss her father and Dele had always spoken about. Kunle was taken by how beautiful she was. He asked her what the problem was, who she was looking for, and why she was crying. Sade proceeded to tell him that her mother was lying critical at the hospital and that she had come to see her father. Kunle was surprised to know that the beautiful young lady was the daughter of Olu, his cleaner. After he sent Sade off to her father's direction, he became restless. He could not get over her beauty. He thought of how and what to do to have her, and then came up with a genius plan. He sent for Olu and made him a proposal. He told Olu that he would pay for his wife's surgery and that Olu would not have to pay him back, but on the condition that he marries his daughter, Sade. Olu's hopes were dashed because he had thought that Mr. Kunle was willing to pay his salary upfront. He told his boss that he couldn't give out his daughter for marriage in exchange for money. When Olu got to the hospital, he was shocked to see how bad Remy's condition had become. She was placed in intensive care and the doctor had advised that the surgery be done soon. When he got back home that day, he was sad and dejected and had no idea what to do. He had been around to his family members and friends, but what they had contributed was not even a quarter of what was required for the surgery. Sade and her twin Dele walked into the living room to find their father in tears. "Why are you crying, Papa?" asked Dele and Sade. Olu told his children about the conversation he had with his boss. Dele was furious and threatened that he was going to get back at his boss, Mr. Kunle. But his father warned him not to try anything stupid in order not to get himself in trouble. He warned Dele that Mr. Kunle may be very young, but he was powerful and had lots of connections. Olu was still contemplating on what to do when Sade said she would do it. "What?" exclaimed her father. "Papa, I will do it." Her father refused and said that there was no way he was exchanging his only daughter for money. Sade insisted in tears. She pleaded with her father, "I don't want Mama to die, knowing that I could have done something to save her." Dele supported his father, saying that there was no way his only sister would marry a heartless man like Mr. Kunle. But it seemed like Sade had made up her mind. She would not sit down and watch her mother die when she could have done something to help. The next day, Sade went to her father's workplace to see Mr. Kunle. She told him that she had accepted his terms, but on the condition that he would sponsor her university education. Initially, Mr. Kunle was upset and said that she ought to be grateful he was offering to marry her. But he thought about it for a while and accepted, saying that it would be unbefitting for him to marry a secondary school graduate. The surgery was done and Remy recovered fast. A week after her surgery, she was discharged. She was grateful to her husband for being able to put the money together for her surgery, but what she did not know was that her only daughter was the price that was paid. Olu had instructed Sade and Dele not to mention it until their mother recovered fully. He had also had an agreement with Mr. Kunle that the wedding ceremony would take place after his wife's recovery. Remi had asked her husband Olu how he got the money for the surgery. He told her he had borrowed it from his boss. Remi was surprised because she was aware that the evil Mr. Kunle was not one to give out money anyhow. He had refused to pay her husband's salary upfront, so what changed? She insisted on knowing what transpired before he finally gave the money. It was 9 weeks after Remi's surgery that Olu decided to talk to his wife about the money. Moreover, Mr. Kunle had started making plans for the wedding. Remi was furious to learn that Sade was the price for her surgery. She blamed Olu for accepting the money. Kunle's mom had died years ago. After his mother died, he left for the US and never wanted to return. He only accepted to return when his father fell sick. But he was in for a surprise when he learned he had to take a wife in order to gain full control of the company. 3 months after Remi's surgery, her daughter got married to Mr. Kunle. After the wedding, Mr. Kunle made it very clear to Olu and his wife Remi that his marriage to their daughter does not give them the right to demand for money or any favors from him. He made it clear that Olu would remain his employee and nothing more. When Sade moved into her husband's house, her husband Kunle laid out his rules. He told Sade that he did not want her family members coming to his house unannounced. In fact, he made it clear that her family members would visit only when he requests. He equally restricted her freedom, forbidding her from leaving the house or seeing her friends and family. He said Sade could only go out when he authorizes. He gave her a cell phone, saying it was for him alone to call her. She was not allowed to give her number out to anyone. He also told Sade that she would return to school after she had had 3 kids for him. At first, Sade did not seem to be bothered about the rules. She hoped that as time went on, her husband Kunle would learn to trust her and relax. But that did not happen. Sade could not please him. Kunle had a chef and would not allow Sade to cook, saying that he did not want to eat the pauper's food she grew up eating. There was also a cleaner, a gardener, driver, housekeeper and a gateman. She tried to be friends with her husband, but he kept away from her. The only time they were close were times he wanted her to please him. 1 year later after their wedding, and there was no sign that Sade was with child. Kunle started to make comments, drawing his wife's attention to the fact that he was expecting her to be pregnant already. 2 years passed and still nothing happened. Kunle became restless, and his behavior towards her became even more terrible. He would often make comments saying he had married his fellow man and that Sade was good for nothing, that she was just a piece of decoration. He hardly took his wife anywhere, only during company events when he knew that partners and clients would be expecting to see them together. He controlled everything about her, told her how to dress, hired a hairdresser who always came to the house to dress her hair. He constantly criticized her, making her feel worthless and belittled her family. Sade endured the bullying and abuse in silence. She had no one to talk to, as her husband had alienated her from her entire family. Some nights, Kunle would bring his mistress home. Whenever he did that, he would ask Sade to sleep in the guest room. That action really hurt her. There were days she would cry and regret her decision to marry Kunle. She had always known the kind of person he was. because her father and brother had spoken about him countless times. Saving her mother's life had been the only thing that mattered at that point. She hadn't stopped to think of what she was getting herself into. She thought about her family, of how peaceful and happy they were, even though they had little. One day, she begged her husband to allow her visit her mother and her family, but he refused. After some time of pleading with him, he agreed. He asked the driver to take her and bring her back after 2 hours. Shade went to visit her parents on a Saturday. They were so happy to see her. They tried to find out how she was, how her husband was treating her. She looked and dressed well, but there was sorrow and pain hidden behind her beautiful smile. Pain she couldn't conceal, no matter how hard she tried. She lied to her family, saying that Kunle was very nice to her and treated her well. Her parents seemed to believe her story, but not Dele. Dele knew that his sister was far from happy and wondered what he could do to help. When Shade was about to leave, Dele cornered her and pleaded with her to tell him how she was honestly faring. Unable to hide her pain from her twin, she broke down as she poured out her heart to him. Her brother felt very hurt and didn't know how to help his sister. He offered to speak with Kunle, but Shade talked him out of it, saying that her husband would not be reasonable enough to listen. 2 weeks after Shade visited her family, she attended an event with her husband Kunle. It was a lavish welcome party which the company had thrown for its new investors. There were very notable, rich and influential men and women in attendance. During Kunle's speech, Shade noticed that her husband seemed a little tense and for a moment had his gaze fixed somewhere behind the guests. She followed his gaze, turning to see her brother. In shock, she excused herself and went to meet him. Dele, what are you doing here? Shade asked in hushed tones. I came to see Kunle. But I told you not to bother. I will be fine, said Shade. Please, you have to leave now. She pleaded with her brother and tried to get him to leave, but Dele was adamant and determined to speak with his in-law. His sister was still trying to get him to leave when Kunle appeared. He looked very furious. What are you doing here? He demanded. I thought I made it clear that your family was not to cross their boundaries. I am not here to ask or demand for anything, Kunle, other than you treat my sister right. How dare you speak to me in that manner, said Kunle. I am your boss. I pay your salary. I practically feed your family. I did your family a favor by marrying your sister, who is useless to me anyway. At that point, Dele had lost his temper just as Kunle had and could not hold back his rage when Kunle called his twin useless. He made a fist and punched him in the face. Kunle staggered backward. Dele had taken him unawares. Tempers flared and guests had turned to see what the commotion was all about. In that instance, some policemen in mufti came at Kunle's signal and took Dele away. Shade tried to plead with her husband but was met with a hard, cold stare. That gesture said everything she needed to know. She sat down with her husband in silence through the rest of the event. When the new investors were introduced, Shade recognized one of them, a young handsome man named Tayo. Tayo had attended the same secondary school as her and her brother. In fact, Tayo and her brother Dele were very good friends back then. She went over to say hello to him. Tayo was surprised to see her and gave her a big hug. As they talked, he asked after Dele. Shade was about to respond when Kunle joined them, obviously looking displeased that another man was getting comfortable and familiar with his wife. He put a hand around Sade's waist, something he hardly did, except he was trying to please a crowd. Sade tensed and Tayo noticed it. "Are you okay?" he asked her. She nodded in affirmative. Sade then introduced Kunle as her husband. Tayo nodded, saying they already met. The rest of the evening went well. Before Tayo left, he slipped a card into Sade's hand and hugged her goodbye, with a nod towards Kunle. When Kunle and his wife got home, he was furious. First, for Dele punching him, and secondly, for Sade getting familiar with another man. She tried to explain that Tayo was a friend from her secondary school days, but Kunle would not listen. He forbade her from ever coming in contact with him and also banned her from ever visiting or contacting her family again. Sade was in tears. Dele was in police custody. She tried pleading with her husband to forgive him and have him released. Dele would not hear of it. He stormed out of the house and didn't come back home that night. Sade was restless and worried about her brother. He would be spending the night, probably days in police cell. Moreover, their parents would be worried sick and have no idea where he was. Then she remembered that Tayo had slipped a complimentary card into her hand. She hurried to her purse, took it out and gave him a call. She told him everything that had happened and begged him to help. Tayo promised to get to it and dropped the call. He was able to bail Dele out of the police cell. When Dele saw him, he was surprised and glad he didn't have to spend a night at the cell. Tayo took him to an expensive eatery where they relaxed and Dele told him all that had happened. Tayo had always liked Sade and even wanted to befriend her back in secondary school, but Dele had refused and made it clear he didn't want him messing around with his sister. Seeing her so beautiful and matured brought back a lot of memories, and to think that she was married to that arrogant man who was busy maltreating her stirred up something within Tayo. The coming days saw Kunle very upset, always yelling at his staff at home. Sade tried as much as possible to stay out of his way, but even that did not help. He looked for every opportunity to shout at her and abuse her family. And this went on for days. One night, 4 days after the event in which Dele had punched him, he brought home one of his numerous girlfriends. Sade was in the living room watching a show on television when they came in. He seemed drunk and then introduced Sade to the lady as his useless, good-for-nothing wife. Both Kunle and his girlfriend laughed out loud. Sade said nothing, but then she said she wanted to speak to her husband in private. Kunle told her to go ahead and speak. Reluctantly, she said she wanted to go back to school, just like he had promised. Kunle said that was not the agreement. She was supposed to give him 3 kids before doing that. He looked around and laughed, saying, "The simplest thing a woman is supposed to do, you couldn't even do that. You are useless, completely useless, and I don't care if you leave or stay." With that, himself and his girlfriend walked away, laughing loudly. Hot tears stinged Sade's eyes. She had never felt so humiliated in her life. She picked up her phone and called Tayo. It was 2 days after Kunle and his girlfriend humiliated Sade. Kunle had not seen his wife. He went to her room and found that her things had gone. He was furious. He called his staff together and questioned them, but no one seemed to have seen her except the gate man, who said she had packed her things and left. He said a man had come to pick her up. Kunle fired his gateman instantly after raining insults on him. That day at the office, he called Olu and demanded that he should send back his daughter as soon as he gets home. Olu was surprised to learn that Sade had left her husband's house. They had not seen or heard from her since the last time she visited. He was worried because he genuinely had no idea where she was. Kunle threatened to fire and arrest him if he did not produce his wife. For the first time since Kunle became his boss, Olu lost his temper and angrily spoke to him and promised to deal with him if he did not produce his daughter. Later that day, Tayo visited Dele and his parents. He told them of Sade's whereabouts. He said Sade had called him that night and pleaded with him to pick her up. He had taken her to the airport where they remained till the following day. He had also helped her with the flight ticket and some money to take care of herself till she returned. Olu, Remi and Dele were so glad to know that Sade was okay, and they thanked Tayo for helping. It was 6 years since Kunle took over the running of his father's company, but like everything else, he had messed the company financially, running it into debts worth billions. That was why the company decided to bring in new partners and investors to help pay up the debt and keep the company afloat. Tayo was one of the investors. In fact, he had bought the highest amount of shares, including 3/4 of what Kunle owned. The board of directors voted Kunle out and voted in Tayo as the new CEO of the company. It was 4 years later when Sade returned to the city. She had bagged her BSc degree in banking and finance and was preparing for her youth service. Her brother Dele, with Tayo's help, had opened up a big mechanic workshop after his apprenticeship. In Sade's absence, her family had ended the marriage between Sade and Kunle and even refunded the money he gave them. Kunle remained in the company, but just as head of department. The board of directors had assigned that to him because of the love and respect they had for his late father. On a particular day, Sade visited Tayo at the office. She came face to face with Kunle, who had come into Tayo's office for a conversation. He was shocked and speechless to see her, looking so well, matured and radiant. Tayo reintroduced Sade to Kunle as his fiancée, who was in town for her youth service. Kunle remained speechless. He tried to apologize but could not find the words. He excused himself and left Tayo's office. Lessons to learn from this story. When pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom. Proverbs 11:2. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. No condition is permanent. We must not look our nose down on people just because we feel we are more privileged than they are. A man who is down today will definitely rise tomorrow. With God, all things are possible. Thank you so much for listening to my story today. If you enjoyed this story, then please leave me a like and leave me a comment. Let me know what you took away from this story today. Share this video to anyone you think would enjoy it and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye.